Hello, everyone. This is your host, Dania Reisi, for the Central Asia Center podcast at the New Lines Institute. Today, we are joining by Dr. Ariel Cohen, non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council Eurasia Center, managing director of the Energy Growth and Security Program at the International Tax and Investment Center, and one of the foremost experts on energy geopolitics in Russia and Central Asia. Dr. Cohen is also energy columnist at the Forbes magazines as well. So thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. I think my first question that I have for you, because I know you've spent a long time and decades analyzing the intersections of energy, security, and geopolitics in Central Asia. We know critical minerals have gone from just a niche topic to being one of the key topics, managing the relationship between the United States and the region. I think my question is, do you think this is the right time for the relationship to be built around extraction of risk, repeating the patterns of the resource dependency that have long shaped the regions, or is it the time for the region to start embarking on new independence relationship with the United States?
Well, it's fascinating how quickly things are changing. Only 30-some years ago, Central Asia, if you ask somebody, those who even knew where it is, would say it is the backyard of the Soviet Union, which was an empire. My book, my dissertation, PhD dissertation at the Fletcher School, and the book was about the collapse of the Soviet Empire. And Central Asia was one of the post-colonial peripheries there. Today, it's 5 countries. It's Kazakhstan, the largest in terms of territory and in terms of GDP. Uzbekistan, the largest in terms of population. And then smaller countries. Turkmenistan, that produces a lot of gas. I think they have 4th largest reserves of natural gas in the world. Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. Of those, 4 out of 5 are Turkic. They speak different languages that are essentially from the Turkic family. Tajikistan speaks a language that is close to Farsi. They're all Sunni Muslim. They have some minorities. Kazakhstan is probably, 30% non-Kazakh, non-Muslim. Mostly Russians, Ukrainians, Germans, Koreans, all kinds of people there. But the rest of the countries are pretty monoethnic with some minorities there. But in the recent history, these countries were not independent. So building independence is a huge challenge for them. It requires national identity. It requires money. You have to build an economy that allows you to really be independent. It requires in one generation to build an elite that can do management, that can do foreign policy, that can do defense policy, everything that a nation does. And I think the 2 big ones, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, are really doing a decent job. The smaller countries are struggling a bit more. And of course, natural resources are the key to developing of their economies, although Kazakhstan, that became a middle income country now, is pushing this $15,000 per capita a year threshold, and very much is interested in diversifying into finance, into digital, into nuclear, because they have huge, and we'll talk about it, huge reserves of uranium. So it's not only, in the case of Kazakhstan, oil and gas, it's not only gold or other minerals in case of Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan also has a glorious tradition of agriculture.
So speaking about these economies want to diversify and expand the relationships, but there are some security challenges around those regions. We have Pakistan and we have Afghanistan and the ongoing tensions from the bottom, and then from the south, and then we have also Iran and what's happening in Iran and the conflict and the role of Azerbaijan there with Iran and the politics there. How do you unpack the relationships and how these economies can actually achieve these economic goals, given that all these challenges, security
Right.
challenges, are
And
happening?
this is probably the key question now, because without security,
Right.
you cannot have real investment.
Exactly.
If capital, especially outside capital, feels insecure, it will not go there. How much capital Abu Dhabi's or Dubai is going to attract in the next year
Right.
till the dust settles on this war? And it's interesting. You asked the question about security in Central Asia, starting with countries that normally don't come up first. Pakistan and Afghanistan. Why? Because there's a shooting war there. People may not pay attention because of Iran and Persian Gulf and Strait of Hormuz, but actually Pakistani Air Force is bombing the crap out of Afghanistan. And for a good reason. We're not going to get into that. I'm at New Lines Institute. You have Dr. Kamran Bukhari, who forgot more about that part of the world than I ever knew. I mean, Pakistan and Afghanistan. But when I look at the map, what do I see? I see the number one peer competitor of the United States, China,
Right.
right next door to the east. And historically, a lot of people don't realize that. Historically, every time the Chinese regime consolidated, the first direction they went was along the Silk Road west.
Right.
So Xinjiang and then Central Asia,
Right.
for hundreds and hundreds of years. Next, you have the former imperial master. I mentioned, my work on the collapse of the Soviet Union. And before the Soviet Union collapsed in 1917, the Russian Empire collapsed, and it also captured Central Asia in the 1870s and 1880s. So Russia is another big imperial power in Central Asia.
Right.
So you have China, you have Russia, both in this alignment or axis that is anti-American and anti-Western. Then you have Iran that we already mentioned. It's Shia. The Shia Islam is less attractive to the Sunni space. A lot of Uzbeks and even Kazakhs are happy to say that their brand of Islam is also, Sunni Islam is also traditionally less extremist as the Twelver Shia in Iran.
Right.
But they have their share of Salafi, Wahhabi, Hizb ut-Tahrir,
Extremist.
and other extremists, Muslim Brotherhood, you name it.
Right.
Even hundreds of guys from Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, etc., went to fight
Right.
in Sham, in Syria.
Right.
Then you have Afghanistan that potentially could threaten these countries, especially Tajikistan, because Tajikistan has a secular regime. It's a poor country. The leader was there for a long time. It's secular, not very stable, necessarily corrupt country, weak, structurally weak. And it had a civil war. The only country that had a real civil war was Tajikistan. It was regionally driven, it was religion versus secular, but it is another symptom of internal structural problems and instability. And then you have Turkey. Turkey is interesting because neither China nor Russia are attractive options
Right.
for Central Asians. Turkey is more attractive because it never ruled over them. There's a cultural affinity, there's linguistic affinity. Everybody's Sunni, and the levels of observance, sort of, kind of. AK party is more Islamist. The ruling parties in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan that I know quite well, they're secular, essentially. The Soviet influence is very interesting because, as brutal as the communists were, they brought education, they brought women's equality and it's all sort of organically being digested now. So in terms of economic engagement, they're looking west.
Mm.
When you look at the young elites, if you want to be in business, where do you go? You go to Harvard Business School, London Business School, NYU Business School, to INSEAD, Fontainebleau, etc. If you're into security, you go to Moscow still. And now increasingly people go to China.
Right.
And in China, they can study both business and security.
Right.
So it is, as it was for thousands of years, a crossroads. China from the east, Europe and Russia, and now also the southern tier, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Turkey, Iran. Eventually, India will play a bigger role, but it's a giant that is very slow to wake up. I'm working on the region for over 30 years, and you still see a relatively low engagement of India and more engagement by Pakistan. That's very interesting.
Right. It's very interesting to see how Pakistan engagement with the West compared to India engagement with the West.
Well, India is sort of a self-sufficient universe.
Right.
It's like a separate planet there. They do their own thing,
Right.
and they engage sort of, they're not nasty, they're not aggressive.
Right.
They don't have the Chinese economic expansion. China is the dominant economic power in Central Asia to the tune of $99 billion, whereas Russia is $44 billion and US is only $7 billion a year, right? So no contest, China is very engaged, but at the same level, the tradition that started with the first president of Kazakhstan, Nursultan Nazarbayev, the tradition that they call the multi-vector policy, they want to be friends with everybody.
Right.
They don't want to be dependent on any one power, although Russia sort of traditionally has the Eurasian Economic Union. It used to be number one investor, not anymore. China overtook it. And my joke is China outsourced security to Russia. So Russia is paying for security. The Chinese are enjoying the security that, among other things, provided by Russia for their businesses and their investment.
Right. I do want to talk about the resources. This is a very good, good segment to talk about the resources. You've mentioned about the Central Asian resources, and I think you mentioned a little bit, you touched on uranium. And so Central Asian states like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan have investing billions in moving up the value chain from raw to refined products. Realistically, can the region become a meaningfully alternative to the Chinese supply chains, or are the investments too large for investment gaps in terms of like how much the Chinese can cover up the investments? And then what is the role of uranium, critical minerals in that level?
So you have critical minerals, you have rare earth, and you have uranium, which is essentially an energy source.
Yes.
So these are three different things.
Exactly.
Strategic mineral can be copper. Strategic mineral can be lithium. These are not rare earths. They're prevalent, they're in large amounts, but the world has an unsatisfiable appetite for copper because we're building all these AI data centers, data infrastructure, cables. Copper is cables. Lithium is for batteries, right? But these are not rare earth. Rare earths are called lanthanoids. You really have to be a chemistry geek like I am. It's a particular part of the periodic table, and you need small amounts. It's a small industry, actually. It's in single billions of dollars, but it's absolutely necessary for computers, aerospace, electronics in general, and for green energy. Very important, right? As lithium is for batteries, rare earth, germanium and whatnot for semiconductors and solar panels and stuff like that. You ask a fascinating question. You ask, can Central Asia replace China? And my answer is, US has a strategic imperative to be independent from the Chinese supply, because China can just close a fist, as they did already,
Right.
with Japan in 2009 and with the United States, or threaten it. And United States is building, or trying to build, a supply chain that will be independent of China, including Central Asia. So Central Asia by itself is not a solution. Central Asia as a part of a non-China chain is a solution. It's part of the solution. In that non-Chinese supply chain, we include United States domestically. I think there's like one big mine in the United States. The discoveries in places like Germany and Sweden, Sweden rare earths, Germany lithium, etc., Latin America and Africa. So when President Trump goes and mediates a peace agreement between Rwanda and Congo, everybody chuckles. I was in Rwanda when it happened, and I said, so what do you think about it? And they said, oh, yeah, well, Trump told us to sign. We signed. We still hate the Congolese. But they stopped shooting. You can go in. And as I said before, business is a coward. Business doesn't want to invest if shooting is going on. And that's going to be a problem now with Qataris rebuilding the LNG, liquefied natural gas. Abu Dhabi, if you want to buy an apartment in Dubai, buy it now, because I'm sure the market is down.
Yep, exactly, the prices.
So in Central Asia, you need a couple of things. The geology is there. They have it. They have the stuff. What they need to have is the laws and the regulations that allow security of investment. And for example, I found out a couple of days ago that Uzbekistan, Tashkent, is copying the Astana International Financial Center and is creating Tashkent International Financial Center with the same model. English law, English lawyers, so human capital is imported, extraterritoriality, and English language to transact business. Okay. And we saw, I was in Astana in November. I visited with the governor because I was an advisor to Astana International Financial Center on strategic communications. And I thought, oh, they probably are still subsidized. The governor told me no. The governor told me they're bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars to the budget of Kazakhstan, because businesses, hundreds of businesses are in that complex. It's a very futuristic complex. Every time I see it, I'm thinking about Star Wars. It looks like Starfleet Academy or something like that. It's very advanced.
Investors are coming to the region.
Yeah, but the architecture of where Astana International Financial Center is a 2017 Expo complex. And it looks like it's designed by the same guy who designed the Starfleet Academy. So if the Uzbeks are doing the same thing, they say that imitation of the highest, highest level of a compliment or something like that. Yeah. They understand they need to provide security of investment. And companies are signing memoranda of understanding and investment agreements in Kazakhstan, in Uzbekistan. Kyrgyzstan also has gold, but the Kyrgyz government is a little bit problematic. I mentioned before, Turkmenistan has a lot of natural gas, but it's a very isolated government, very isolated country. Tajikistan is building this huge power station to produce aluminum. Because this big power station will provide a lot of electricity. And generally speaking, yes, mining is going to be, for the foreseeable future, a big area of investment. but they're smart. They're not limiting themselves to mining. And also, if you're mining something, you need to find ways to get it out. Because it's like really heart of Eurasia.
Right.
And the way they're getting it out, they're building what they call a middle corridor. Middle corridor is a system of routes. It's railroads, it's highways, it's airports, it's cables, whatnot. But having it in every individual country, there are 5 countries, without connectivity is problematic. So the challenge is for C5, as we call them, the 5 Central Asian countries, to be able to design a system that allows a cargo to move pretty seamlessly, clear customs, not being harassed by corrupt officials or corrupt police. And today, a container on a train or on a truck can go from China to Europe in 12 days. So if it's on a train, they go from China into Kazakhstan to the Caspian Sea, which is a huge lake, on a ferry, on a boat, cross Caspian to Azerbaijan, get on a train, and go to Turkey and to Europe. Now, our viewers and listeners probably heard about TRIP, T-R-I-P-P.
The Trump, yep.
The Trump route for international peace and prosperity. Everything is Trump, the Trump Kennedy Center.
Right.
They're going to rename
The
Washington Trump Washington. Just kidding. But the TRIP, the corridor, will allow to put container, if they build, it's short, it's 44 kilometers.
Right.
But it'll go straight into Turkey, in the Turkish system. And these containers, first by truck and then by rail, will get into the Turkish and European system pretty quickly.
Right.
And the speed, especially now, think about it, like what do you see in the news? Not just the Persian Gulf is being closed, the Red Sea is being harassed by the Houthis.
Right.
What does it mean? It means you cannot go to the Suez Canal
anymore.
Right? Houthis are right next to Bab el-Mandeb, the southern entrance to the Red Sea.
Right.
Then the container ship goes up the Red Sea to Suez, all the way up to Port Said, and they cannot do it because of the Houthis. So what do you do instead? Either you put it on a boat and go around Africa, and that makes it longer,
very longer and expensive.
burns more fuel,
Right.
diesel, on a ship.
Right.
Or you put on a train, which is also more expensive, but it's quicker. It's 12 days instead of 3 months.
Right.
Oh, no, it's less than 3 months. 35 days through Suez and maybe even more through around Africa. So it gives you an advantage of speed. And speed is good for high fashion if it's made in China, maybe higher end electronics, whatever the economic reason is for shipping it by land instead of by ship. And also, the middle corridor bypasses Russia, and Russia is problematic now because of the war in Ukraine. What happens if finally Russia understands that they spent 4+ years? I'm working on a report at the Atlantic Council now called The Bloody Hectare. How much blood and money they invest in each hectare or square kilometer they take in Ukraine. And it's millions and millions of dollars.
Right.
It doesn't make any economic sense. So if and when that war stops, if and when the sanctions stop, Russia will again become a railroad route from China to Europe. For now, it's not.
It's not. I have a question about that. So I met with the ambassador, former U.S. ambassador Daniel Rosenblum, and we talked
I know
about
him.
and we talked about the economic liberalizations that these economies are going through. And you also mentioned that today. They're going through a lot of economic liberalizations, reforms. They're attracting private investors. They're building all these digital centers. And it looks like the West and United States are going to be the major, driving force for this economy economically. It looks like our relationship with these countries right now are much more transactional. And I wonder if you think, is this enough? Or should we also be talking about reshaping these relationships from a political perspective and the importance of governance and economic reforms in these political reforms in these economies, and how that could happen with the current economy, especially that a lot of them are not democratic economies now.
All right. So the question about transactional versus overall reform, it is an important question that several U.S. administrations tried, and there is a resistance in many of these countries to change the political system and to get to the Western standard of circulation of elites and real opposition parties and all that. I think we are at a point where the Trump administration is really focused on natural resources, geopolitics, trade and investment, having Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan in the Board of Peace, having Kazakhstan in the Abraham Accords, as opposed to high level of standards that Europeans and Americans like to see in elections and political activity. I'm all in favor of that. And you see that both Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan sort of relaxed their, internal policing of the political space and whatnot.
Maybe this is why also they're calling for a referendum right now. Kazakhstan, there is a referendum, do you think?
I think the referendum is an imprimatur that they'll put on the political reform of going from bicameral parliament. It's internal baseball. A lot of people who don't follow it won't care, but they're going from bilateral parliament, meaning lower house and senate, to one unicameral, one house of the parliament, one chamber.
Right.
We'll see if President Tokayev puts aside the previous presidency and does another 7-year term. There are rumors that he wants to be Secretary General of the United Nations. We'll see. I don't see Uzbekistan also moving to some kind of parliamentary democracy or anything like that anytime soon, to be honest. But the United States historically conducted business with all kinds of countries, and what we talk about here, uranium, which we didn't talk yet about.
We have, that's
rare earths, strategic minerals, oil and gas. These are the priorities, especially when Afghanistan still harbors ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and Uzbekistan is right next to it, right? China is expanding its presence and investment. Russia is not an easy partner for the United States at all. I mean, look at Trump begging Russia to stop the senseless slaughter in Ukraine when they're not expanding the front lines even, right? And losing tremendous amount of people. I mean, they're losing 4,000 to 5,000 people a month. Right? So I think the geopolitics now, especially after Iran, are dictating the priorities. And thank goodness we educated those elites enough to understand that markets, transparency, rule of law such as it is. I mean, I still, if I have my options, would go for litigation or arbitration in London, in Stockholm, in New York, and not in Bishkek. Right? But on the business side, there's much better understanding. On the political side, the question is also, to what extent can we dictate
the politics
and also if we push it too much, if we twist their hands how much backlash we're going to get, and they'll go to China and Russia
Right.
as their sugar daddies.
Right. Absolutely. I do want to talk about the earth minerals. I'm really want to hear your insights about the uranium, the earth minerals, and the rare gas, and your insight on the
So
current
the rare
situation.
earth minerals are absolutely strategic. Like you're making, now there's a lot of media attention that we're running out of missile defense launchers, not missile defense launchers, missiles for anti-missile systems.
Right.
Tomahawk missiles.
Yep.
And every missile like that has many, many pounds
Right.
of rare earths because they have their own little brains, and these are semiconductors, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
As we're progressing towards green energy, rare earths are also very important. I drive an electric car. There's a lot of rare earths going into electric car, and there's strategic minerals like lithium in the big battery in my electric car, etc. One lesson that I think I'm going to communicate in my Forbes column and elsewhere is that the horrible war in the Persian Gulf teaches us that electrification of transport is actually our energy security. That if the electricity for your transportation can come from nuclear, can come from wind, solar, natural gas, etc., you're less dependent on that gasoline at the pump. So more electric cars, more solar, it's all driving up the rare earth markets.
Right.
On uranium, which is very important, there's a talk of something called nuclear renaissance for many, many years. US is trying to sort of leapfrog and say, okay, these big reactors are very expensive, capital intensive. They cost, $5 billion per unit. And it takes many, many years to get all the authorizations, all the regulatory stuff. It's expensive to work through it, etc. The Chinese bypass it by saying, oh, okay, we approve the prototype, so now every time you put a machine like that, a reactor like that, that's fine. And we give an order to the local council and they approve it, right? In the West, you cannot do that. Right. There are lawsuits, people don't like it, environmentalists don't like it, etc. So we are leapfrogging it by doing something called small modular reactors. And these are reactors, some of these reactors are so small, the military now starts using them. You can put it on an airplane and fly it. Of course, it supplies less electricity, but still, it more widespread. It's a closed system, so you cannot take out uranium and spread it. It's supposed to be secure. The first time there's a terror attack with uranium or plutonium from these small nuclear reactors, there's going to be a tragedy, but we're not there yet. So there are competing prototypes for small reactors. I think there are 1 or 2 new reactors being built, really not a lot. Some of these companies are exporting these reactors. So instead of going through really excruciating process of regulation here, they find a jurisdiction where it's easier. But it's happening. I didn't check the uranium prices recently, but I think there was an increase, significant increase in uranium prices. And Kazakhstan is a major exporter, and interestingly enough, both Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan are now building nuclear reactors because their population is growing. These are young populations, both Kazakhstan, especially Uzbekistan. A lot of younger people, population is growing, they need more electricity. They also want to put AI processing centers. Uzbekistan has an ambitious program of becoming a software actor, not just AI, in general, software They have programmers. They want, oh, we're going to have 1 million programmers. Okay. But that means more electricity. Also, the world is becoming hotter. If it's becoming hotter, you need more air conditioning. And you need a lot of air conditioning for the data centers. So that all drives these nuclear reactors. So far, Kazakhstan signed one contract with Russia, I think one contract with China, and they may go for another big reactor. Uzbekistan is signing small modular reactor contracts, but it's a game that is ongoing, both for exports of uranium and for domestic consumption.
I have a question about that. It looks like the countries are expanding their project without taking into consideration the water, right? All these projects requires a lot of water.
Yes.
And there is a serious concerns between the upper stream and lower stream countries. There's a dam that is being constructed right now, and there is concern about the finance of that dam and the money.
Are you talking about dam in Afghanistan or talking about the dam where?
The dam, the water dam that is being constructed in, I think, Kyrgyzstan.
Could be.
And then there's concerns about like the financing of that dam.
Well, there's an electricity power station in Tajikistan,
Right.
Argun,
Right,
right?
right,
Multi-billion-dollar project.
right.
But from what I remember when I looked at it, they got the funding. But what is happening, and this was the topic of our report at the Atlantic Council, is that population is growing so fast.
The Ragun Dam. I was talking about
Yeah.
the Ragun Dam. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's a dam and it's a power station
Right.
for aluminum
Right.
smelter.
Right.
So all that and the climate change that causes snow to melt faster, removing the pace of melt and of water. So if it's snow, it lies in the mountains, it slowly melts, and there's a steady pace of water going in these mountain rivers. If it's warmer, there's no snow, it just goes into the ground. It still may be the same amount of water or even more water,
Right.
but there's no flow in the rivers,
Right.
or less flow in the rivers.
Right.
So there's a problem for your hydro, which used to be in the Soviet times, a big source of electricity. You talked about upstream countries. The
Right.
upstream countries are Kyrgyzstan
Right.
and Tajikistan. The downstream countries are primarily Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Kazakhstan. So that's a problem.
Right.
And the growing population
It's another.
is another problem because
Right.
they consume water. And for example, Uzbekistan used to waste a lot of water because the Soviet designed, Soviet built canals wasted a lot of water. They didn't even pave the bottoms of the canal. So the water was flowing and seeping into the ground. So if you cover these canals with either plastic or ceramic or whatever, it will waste less. The other thing you can do, you can cover the canals so it doesn't evaporate. Another thing you can do, and I strongly advertise it or promote it, use drip irrigation.
Mm-hmm.
Drip irrigation is not new. It's used in the United States, used in the Middle East. US and Israel are two leaders in drip irrigation. It's basically a little pipe, and people know what drip irrigation is. People use it in their gardens in the United States. And it drips a little bit, and you can grow vegetables and whatnot. And you also probably are better off cutting your cotton production
Right.
because it wasted so much
Right.
water and also labor, because in Uzbekistan they used to send school children
To work.
and students to work in the fields to pick cotton.
Right.
When you can do it with a machine, or you grow something else, fruits, vegetables, nuts, that also don't consume as much water. And you can take industrial water or water that people already used in their homes, purify it, and recycle industrial water for irrigation of your crops.
Right.
You can do that too. That is a long way for all Central Asian countries, but I'll leave you with one example, which is a sad example of an environmental catastrophe. And it's called the Aral Sea. And the Aral Sea, 100 plus years ago, was a sweet water lake, very big. Not as big as the Caspian Sea, but it's still very, very big lake. Came the Russian colonial power, and started agriculture, started taking water from the Aral Lake to grow cotton. The Soviets were pushing cotton also because they didn't have other sources of cotton. And the Aral Lake slowly became salinated. The water became salty, and then it started to shrink. And when it shrunk, what was left on the bottom was salt and sand.
Yep.
And the wind comes, picks it up, and they find, because you can trace it with radioactive markers or whatever, you find this sand and salt from the Aral Sea as far as the Pacific, as far as the Arctic Ocean and Europe. Right. So thousands of kilometers of this stuff. And of course, it killed the fish, killed the birds. It also kills people because people are breathing the salt, and some really, you want a nightmare film scenario. There was an island called the Renaissance Island in the Aral Sea that the Soviets were doing biological weapons experimentation on animals and burying the animals in the island. And then when the sea dried up, now these animals with anthrax, pests, horrible diseases are all buried there, and other animals can come and dig it up, or people can go and harvest the pathogens and whatnot. It's very dangerous. They really need to pay attention and keep this right. Renaissance Island off limits for everybody, because terrorists can come there and pick up some, horrible disease pathogens. So you have to be a responsible host of your environment, be it not turning a big lake into a salt desert. Now, the Caspian Sea is also in play now, because the more they take the water, the less water goes into the Caspian Sea.
Exactly.
So even on energy that we talked before, you build a port, and the port is supposed to take a ship, right? A tanker. And you put oil in a tanker, and when you put oil in a tanker, it sinks, right? It needs depth. There's no depth.
There's no enough water.
You cannot get the ship out from Kazakhstan to Uzbekistan to Azerbaijan. So you need to take into account all that and keep the Caspian Sea from shrinking like the Aral Sea did.
That's exactly the question that I was going to ask, is how they're facing really the water challenges, because that's the major issues. Yeah. I think my last question is related to a project that the New Alliance is working on it, and I'm sure you've heard about it, is the S7 or the Silk 7 project. I think for that project, we're aiming to see more integrations between these economies and more collaborations on various economic challenges. I think my question for you is, how do you think these economies can overcome some of the challenges, such as Afghanistan and Pakistan rule, and the conflict that's going between them, the rule of Azerbaijan, and of course the Middle Corridor? How can we all be used to increase integration?
Why don't you tell our viewers and listeners what S7 is, in addition to the 5 Central Asian? It's Mongolia and Afghanistan, right?
Yeah, so the S7 is a 5 major Central Asian economy, in addition to Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Azerbaijan.
Oh, what about Mongolia? Let's make it C8.
Maybe we should make it C8.
So it's fascinating that Pakistan is a part of that, because Pakistan, until very recently, was not a part of that discussion. The traditional view in Washington was Central Asia, plus Afghanistan, because of the southern corridor, southern direction. And people said, oh, I actually considered doing a report on the southern corridor, and that would be Central Asia, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan.
Yep.
Well, today it's kind of not in the cards right now,
Right.
because of the war between Pakistan and Afghanistan,
Right.
because of the nature of the regime in Kabul, because of the presence of ISIS and Al Qaeda in Afghanistan. So it would be wonderful for Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan. I remember I did a report with Lisa Curtis, who is one of the active Central and South Asia analysts here, who was on Trump National Security Council, Trump 1. We did a report around 2006, 2007 about a pipeline project called TAPI, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India. Well, the relations between Pakistan and India are not so good. Now the relations between Pakistan and Afghanistan are so good. So one day, inshallah, maybe we'll have the TAPI gas pipeline from Turkmenistan to the markets, huge markets of Pakistan and India. For now, it's not happening.
It's not happening. Right?
In terms of the corridor to the port of Gwadar on the Chinese, Indian Ocean, that would be one option, but you need to go through Afghanistan. Yeah. Another port would be Bandar Abbas in Iran. And again, with the war in Iran, you cannot have it. Right. So tragically, the southern dimension, Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan right now are very problematic because of geopolitics. Right. That's why I brought up Mongolia, because there is the continuity. There's also similarity in terms of mining. Mongolia is a mining superpower. It has coal, it has copper. I think it has some uranium also. It's a big flat desert, and the Chinese market is next door. Koreans, Japanese, Russians are all interested. There's a gas pipeline going from Russia to China via Mongolia, and there's a railroad. So, and I think Mongolians are pretty open-minded. There are corruption issues, but they're open-minded for investment and whatnot. So I am overall very positive about Central Asia. Yeah. I think the West collectively, US, but also Europeans, should be involved there in Central Asia. I think that having traveled there a lot and knowing the people are pretty open-minded. And it's a very fascinating area where Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, Russians, and Westerners can all engage and interact, hopefully without violence and without hostility and animosity.
Thank you so much. We'll end on this good note. Thank you so much for listening.